All right, let's talk about one of the most famous paintings on the planet, Sandro Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. Now, when this thing was first seen in Florence around 1485, it wasn't just another pretty picture. Oh no, it was a total bombshell, one that basically announced a massive change was coming to Western art.
And to really get just how big a deal this was, you just got to look at this comparison. On the left, you have typical art from that time, very flat, very severe, very Gothic. And on the right, you have Venus. The difference is just, well, staggering. It's like jumping from one universe to another, from rigid religious rules to a celebration of human beauty.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did this happen? How did art make such a radical leap in basically a single generation, from something so sacred and formulaic to something so breathtakingly human? Well, that's the story we're going to unpack.
Let's start with what was, without a doubt, the most shocking part for anyone seeing this in the 15th century, and that is the nude, a full-sized, front and center female nude. You have to understand, before Botticelli, if you saw a big nude figure in a painting, she was almost always a symbol of sin or shame. Think of Eve, getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But this wasn't Eve. This was Venus, a goddess. This was a radical, unapologetic celebration of the human form, of beauty itself, and yeah, maybe even of sex.
So how was a painting like this even possible back then? Well, it took what you could call a perfect storm. It was this incredible combination of immense wealth, massive political power, and a revolutionary new way of thinking that we now call the Renaissance. And at the absolute heart of all this change was an idea called humanism. Now, it's really important to note, this wasn't an anti-Christian movement, not at all. It was more about renewing Christianity by bringing back ideas from ancient Greece and Rome, focusing on things like human potential, free will, and the wild concept that art could be made for pleasure, not just to serve God.
And this is basically the engine that drove the whole thing. You start with the Medici banking family. They were the wealthiest and most powerful people in Florence. They used all that money and power to fund these new humanist thinkers. And those thinkers, in turn, inspired the incredible art that the Medicis commissioned from geniuses like Botticelli. It's a direct pipeline, from money to new ideas to truly revolutionary art. Okay, now let's actually decode the painting itself, because it really is like a beautiful puzzle where every single element is telling you a little piece of the story.
So first things first, a quick correction. The title we all use, The Birth of Venus, is actually a little misleading. The painting isn't showing her literal birth from the sea foam. What it's actually capturing is the moment right after that, her arrival on the shores of Cyprus, carried there on that giant scallop shell. If you look over there on the left, you've got the wind gods. That's Zephyr, the god of the warm spring wind, and he's literally blowing Venus to land, and the woman he's holding is thought to be his wife, the nymph Chloris. Together, their breath is propelling Venus to the shore. Then, rushing to greet Venus from the right is one of the Horae. These were the goddesses of the seasons, and we know exactly which season she represents because of her dress. It's embroidered with spring flowers like daisies and primroses. So this is spring, ready to welcome and cover the newborn goddess. But here's where Botticelli gets really clever, down in the little details. Look at the roses floating through the air. According to legend, roses first bloomed on Earth at the moment of Venus's birth. But the real hidden gem? Check out the orange grove. One of the Italian names for oranges back then was Mala Medica, a very clever little pun on the Medici family name. It's a secret nod to his patrons. A huge part of Botticelli's genius was figuring out how to make this pagan subject acceptable to his very Christian audience. And he did it with the composition. A central figure, figures flying on the left, an attendant on the right. This whole setup deliberately mirrors how artists traditionally painted the baptism of Christ. It made a radical subject feel familiar and a lot less shocking. And this gets us into the deep philosophy of the time. Thinkers in Florence were really into this idea called Neoplatonism. The short version is that they believed Venus had two sides. There was an earthly Venus who inspired physical love, and a celestial Venus who inspired a divine, more intellectual kind of love. This painting is seen as a representation of that higher, spiritual form of beauty and love. So, we've talked about the story and the ideas, but what about the actual style? I mean, that incredible, dreamlike look.
This obviously doesn't look like a photograph, and believe me, that was completely intentional.
Take a look at the way she's standing. A classical Greek or Roman statue would be in a balanced, realistic pose they called contrapposto. But Botticelli gives Venus this elegant, impossible curve, something art historians call the Gothic sway. Anatomically, she'd fall right over, but in art, it gives her this divine, floating sense of grace.
And that's really the key to the whole thing. Botticelli isn't trying to paint reality. He's creating a mythical world. The figures seem to float. Nobody casts a shadow. And even the little V-shaped waves in the sea are pure pattern. He's using his style to tell us that we are looking at a divine vision, not a real place.
A lot of that radiant, luminous quality also comes from his technique. He is something called egg tempera, where you literally mix ground-up pigment with egg yolk. It's a really difficult medium because it dries super fast, but the payoff is these incredibly clear, bright colors that don't yellow over time. He even used pure gold for highlights, which gives it that divine glow.
But the story doesn't end in 1485. After its creation, this painting went on an absolutely wild journey, from being almost totally forgotten to becoming one of the most recognizable images on the entire planet.
So here's a quick look at its incredible path. It was made for a private country villa, which is probably what saved it from the infamous Bonfire of the Vanities in 1497 when a religious fanatic took over Florence. After that, it fell into obscurity for centuries, only to be rediscovered around the year 1900 when it just rocketed to global fame.
And here is the most fascinating twist in the whole tale. That Dominican friar, Savonarola, who was preaching against sinful pagan art like this, one of his most enthusiastic followers was Sandro Botticelli himself. Yup, he reportedly even threw some of his own paintings on the fire. This masterpiece survived because it was out in the country, safe from everyone, including just maybe its own creator. And if we fast forward to today, its influence is just everywhere. That iconic pose has been referenced countless times. It was the very first logo for Adobe Illustrator. It's Ursula Andress coming out of the sea in the James Bond movie Dr. No. You see it in Andy Warhol's art in Lady Gaga's music videos. It has become a cornerstone of our visual culture. So in the end, what is the birth of Venus? Is it a complex philosophical allegory about divine love? Was it a beautiful wedding gift for a Medici? Or is its ultimate message something a little simpler? That just celebrating beauty for its own sake can be one of the most powerful and revolutionary ideas of all?